Margaret Williams sat in her rocking chair, the same one where she'd nursed 4 babies, read countless bedtime stories, and kissed away scraped knees. The house felt enormous around her. 5 bedrooms that once echoed with laughter now stood silent as tombs. The phone hadn't rung in 3 weeks. She remembered when David, her eldest, used to call every Sunday. "Mom, I'll never be too busy for you," he'd promised when he left for college. That was 15 years ago. Now he lived in Manhattan with his wife, Sarah, and twin boys she'd met exactly twice. Christmas cards had replaced phone calls, and even those had become sporadic. Jennifer, her only daughter, lived just 40 minutes away, but might as well have been on Mars. "I'm so busy with the kids, Mom." "You understand." Margaret did understand. She understood that soccer practice and piano lessons had become more important than the woman who'd driven Jennifer to her own lessons for 12 years straight. Then there were the twins, Mark and Michael. Mirror images who'd grown into strangers. Mark in Seattle, building his tech empire. Michael in Los Angeles, chasing his dreams of becoming a screenwriter. Both too important now for the small-town mother who'd worked double shifts at the diner to pay for their college. Margaret's arthritis had worsened this year. Some mornings, she couldn't open the pickle jars. Some evenings, she sat on the porch, waiting for headlights that never turned into her driveway. The neighbor's Mrs. Chin next door, young Tommy who delivered groceries, they checked on her more than her own flesh and blood. She'd stopped mentioning her loneliness to her children during their rare calls. It only made them defensive, guilty, angry. Better to smile through the phone, pretend she was fine, let them sleep peacefully in their separate lives. But Margaret Williams wasn't fine. And she wasn't stupid. At 78, she'd learned that love given freely doesn't guarantee love returned. She'd learned that children grow wings not to fly back home, but to soar as far away as possible. She'd learned that the heart she'd split 4 ways had been left scattered across the country like autumn leaves. The realization came to her on a Tuesday morning while watching the sun rise alone. Again, she walked to her desk, pulled out a legal pad, and began writing. The pen felt heavy in her weathered hands, but her resolve felt light as air. For the first time in years, Margaret Williams smiled a real smile. Her children had taught her something valuable, though they'd never know it. They taught her that family isn't always about blood. What she wrote that morning would change everything. But first, she had work to do. 3 months after that Tuesday morning revelation, Margaret Williams had become Millbrook's best-kept secret. Well, not exactly secret. Everyone knew what she was doing. They just couldn't believe it. It started with 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez, whose family couldn't afford the school supplies on the list. Margaret had overheard Emma's mother crying in the grocery store, calculating and recalculating her budget. The next day, a box of notebooks, pencils, and backpacks appeared on the Rodriguez doorstep with a note from a friend who believes in dreams. Then came the Pattersons, facing eviction. After John lost his job at the factory, their rent $1,200 appeared anonymously in their mailbox, along with 3 more months' worth. "Someone's watching over us," Mary Patterson whispered to her husband. Someone was. Margaret had discovered something beautiful about giving anonymously. It made the recipients believe in miracles instead of feeling indebted. It restored their faith in humanity rather than making them feel small. It was love in its purest form, expecting nothing in return. The Millbrook Elementary School had needed a new playground for 5 years. Budget cuts had left the children with rusted swings and a slide. That was more liability than fun. Margaret wrote a check for $47,000. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's aunt, cried when she received it. The return address simply said "a friend of children." But Margaret's generosity went beyond money. Every Tuesday, she volunteered at the food bank, her silver hair covered by a baseball cap, unrecognized by most. She sorted canned goods and packed family boxes, listening to stories of hardship with the patience of someone who'd lived through plenty herself. She knew which families needed extra protein, which children had food allergies, which elderly residents lived alone. Mrs. Chin next door had mentioned that the community center's roof leaked every time it rained. Margaret arranged for its repair. When the local library needed new computers, she made sure they got them. When teenage mother Lisa Williams, no relation, needed childcare to finish high school, Margaret quietly funded a babysitter. She attended every high school graduation, every little league game, every school play. Not as Margaret Williams, mother of 4 absent children, but as Margaret Williams, honorary grandmother to an entire town. The children knew her. They waved from school buses, shared their lunch cookies with her, told her about their crushes and their fears. She was the lady who always had tissues, band-aids, and encouraging words. She was the woman who showed up. Her own grandchildren, David's boys, and New York wouldn't recognize her in a crowd. But every child in Millbrook knew Margaret's smile. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 30 years raising 4 children who'd grown too important to need her. Now she was mothering an entire community that appreciated every gesture. Her bank account was steadily shrinking, but her heart was growing fuller by the day. Margaret had found her true calling, and she was just getting started. She'd given her children life. Now she was giving her town hope. But the biggest gift was still to come. David Williams loosened his tie as he sat in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Henderson and Associates. The funeral had been small, embarrassingly so. Margaret had outlived most of her friends, and her children's acquaintances didn't know her well enough to attend. Even in death, she'd been forgotten by most. But not by the lawyer. James Henderson had known Margaret for 40 years. He'd handled her divorce, witnessed her struggles as a single mother, and watched her work herself nearly to death to give her children opportunities she'd never had. What he was about to reveal would shock them all. Jennifer fidgeted with her purse, checking her phone twice. The babysitter was expensive, and she needed to get home. Mark drummed his fingers on the table, his mind already calculating his inheritance and how it would boost his startup's funding. Michael stared out the window, composing his mother's eulogy in his head, the one he should have written years ago. None of them noticed Henderson's grave expression. "Thank you all for coming," Henderson began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of legal practice. "I know this has been a difficult time." David nodded impatiently. "Let's just get through this, Jim. Mom was always simple about money. I assume she split everything 4 ways?" Henderson opened the will slowly, deliberately. "Your mother was indeed clear about her wishes. However, I don't think any of you will find them simple." The rustling of papers filled the silence. "I, Margaret Eleanor Williams, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, including my home at 1247 Maple Street, all bank accounts, investments, and personal belongings to the town of Millbrook, with specific instructions for their use in community improvement projects." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire they couldn't yet see. Jennifer spoke first, her voice thin and disbelieving. "What? That can't be right." Henderson continued reading, his voice steady but his eyes sympathetic. "To my children David, Jennifer, Mark, and Michael, I leave my love and the lessons I hope they've learned about the importance of presence over presence, time over money, and community over convenience." David's face flushed red. "This is insane." She was clearly not of sound mind. "We'll contest this." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Henderson replied gently. "Your mother was evaluated by 2 independent physicians 6 months ago. She was found to be completely competent. She also included several letters for you." He handed each of them an envelope bearing their name in Margaret's careful handwriting. Mark stared at his letter like it might bite him. "How much are we talking about here?" Henderson consulted his papers. "The total estate is valued at approximately $2.3 million. The number hit them like a physical blow. Their mother, who'd served coffee and pie at Murphy's Diner for 30 years, who lived in the same modest house, who'd worn the same winter coat for a decade, had been sitting on over $2 million. Where the hell did she get that kind of money?" Michael demanded. "Your mother was remarkably frugal and an excellent investor. She lived on her Social Security and invested everything else. The house has also appreciated significantly since she bought it in 1978. Jennifer's voice cracked. "She gave it all away. She gave it all to strangers." David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is revenge. She's punishing us." Henderson's expression hardened slightly. "Your mother wasn't vindictive, David. If anything, she was heartbroken. She came to see me 6 months ago, hoping one of you might visit for her 78th birthday. When none of you came, she made her final decision." The truth settled over them like a heavy blanket. They hadn't just lost an inheritance. They'd lost their mother long before she died, and they were only realizing it now. Mark opened his letter with shaking hands. After reading the first few lines, he closed it and put his head in his hands. The letters would reveal just how much they'd lost and how much their mother had gained by letting them go. David's letter was the longest. Margaret had always had the most to say to her firstborn. "My dearest David, you were my first miracle. I was barely 22 when you were born, scared and alone, but the moment I held you, I knew I could do anything. You were my brave boy who protected your siblings, who helped me carry groceries when you could barely reach the counter yourself. I remember when you got your first job on Wall Street. You called me, so excited, talking about numbers I didn't understand, but loving the pride in your voice. You promised you'd buy me a house someday. You did better than that. You built your own empire. But somewhere between your success and my pride, we lost each other. Your calls became quarterly reports. Your visits became obligations. I became a line item in your busy schedule. I don't blame you for building your life. I blame myself for not teaching you that success without connection is just expensive loneliness. I watched you become everything I'd hoped for and nothing I recognized. Sarah seems lovely from the photos you used to send. Your boys have your eyes. I wish I'd known them. I wish they'd known their grandmother as more than a stranger who sent birthday cards. The money I'm giving away? It was supposed to be yours. All of it. But then I realized you don't need my money. You've made your own. What you needed was my time, my stories, my love. What I needed was yours. I'm giving this money to people who will remember where it came from, who will use it to build something beautiful together. I hope someday you understand that the richest person isn't the one who dies with the most money, but the one who dies knowing they mattered. You mattered to me, David. You always did. I just don't think I mattered to you anymore. I hope you find your way back to the boy who used to read me the funny papers on Sunday mornings. All my love, Mom. P.S. There's a photo album in my closet labeled David's Firsts. I kept everything. Jennifer's hands trembled as she read her letter in the parking lot of the law office. My beautiful Jennifer, you gave me my first daughter moment when you painted your fingernails with my lipstick at age 4. You gave me my last when you called me embarrassing in front of your friends at 16. Both memories make me smile now. Motherhood is a strange gift. We teach our children to fly, then spend forever missing the sound of their wings in our house. You flew beautifully, Jen. Marriage, children, the life you built, I'm proud of all of it. But I became a relic in that life. The grandmother who lived too far away, called at inconvenient times, gave outdated advice. I understood when you stopped bringing the kids for Sunday dinner. I didn't understand why you stopped calling altogether. I know you're busy. I know children consume every moment of your day. I remember. But I also remember my own mother, and how I wished I'd called her more before she was gone. Your children are lucky to have you. I hope someday they're better at showing you than you were at showing me. The money I'm leaving to the town includes funds for a new playground at Millbrook Elementary. Maybe someday your children will play there and think of their grandmother they barely knew. I saved all your report cards. You always wrote the most beautiful stories. Love always, Mom. Mark crumpled his letter before reading it completely, but the words he'd seen burned in his mind. You were always my dreamer, building empires out of Legos and promises. I'm proud of the man you became, but I miss the boy who used to call me his best friend. You stopped believing in dreams that included your family. Michael's letter was the shortest. My baby boy, you're probably writing my story in your head right now, aren't you? Making me the villain who stole your inheritance, or the tragic hero who died forgotten. I'm neither, sweetheart. I'm just a mother who loved her children more than they loved her back. That's not a tragedy, that's just Tuesday for most parents. Write our story someday, but write it true. Write about the woman who worked 2 jobs to pay for your film school. Write about the mother who believed in your dreams, even when you stopped sharing them with her. Write about love that doesn't quit, even when it probably should. The end. Mom. 4 successful adults sat in their separate cars in a lawyer's parking lot, crying for the mother they'd lost years before she died. They'd been so busy building their lives, they'd forgotten to include her in them. And now it was too late for everything except regret. The letters revealed the truth they'd been avoiding. They hadn't lost a mother. They'd abandoned her. The Millbrook Community Center had never held so many people. Folding chairs borrowed from 3 churches filled every available space, and still people stood along the walls, spilled onto the front steps, gathered in the parking lot with the doors propped open so they could hear. This wasn't a funeral. Margaret Williams had already been buried, attended by her 4 children and a handful of elderly neighbors. This was something else entirely, a celebration, a testimony, a reckoning. Mayor Patricia Hendricks stood at the makeshift podium, looking out at faces she'd known for decades. Faces that were smiling through tears, holding hands, clutching flowers and handwritten notes. When we first learned of Margaret Williams' incredible gift to our town, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. I'll admit I was shocked. Not by her generosity. Anyone who really knew Margaret wasn't surprised by that. I was shocked by the size of her heart. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. See, most of us knew Margaret as the quiet lady who volunteered everywhere, who remembered every child's birthday, who somehow always knew when families were struggling. What we didn't know was that she was our anonymous angel. Emma Rodriguez, now 11 and standing with her family near the front, raised her hand tentatively. She bought my school supplies, she said in a clear, proud voice. And she always had extra cookies at the food bank. She fixed our roof, called out Mrs. Patterson from the middle of the crowd. Saved us from losing our home. She paid for my mom's medicine, added teenage Tommy Chin, Margaret's former neighbor. For 6 months after Dad died. Never asked for anything back. One by one, they stood. The Johnsons, whose son's cancer treatments had been supplemented by anonymous donations. The Martinez family, whose restaurant had stayed afloat during the pandemic thanks to mysterious tips left in their account. The high school graduating class of 2023, whose college fund had received a contribution that made dreams possible. Drive. Sarah Kim, the town's pediatrician, wiped her eyes as she spoke. Margaret funded our mobile clinic for 3 years. We were able to provide free checkups for every child in the county. She never wanted recognition, never asked for thanks. She just said, children deserve to be healthy. Principal Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a folder thick with papers. Margaret Williams didn't just donate to our school. She came to every play, every concert, every graduation. She knew our students' names, their struggles, their dreams. When we needed new computers, they appeared. When our lunch program ran short, somehow there was always enough food. She opened the folder, her voice growing stronger. I have 47 thank you letters from children who received scholarships, supplies, or help from Margaret Williams. 47 children whose lives were changed by a woman who asked nothing in return except that they be kind to others. The crowd was silent now, absorbing the magnitude of what they were learning. Margaret Williams hadn't just been generous, she'd been systematic, thoughtful, transformative. I want to read you something, Principal Rodriguez continued, pulling out a letter. This is from Marcus Johnson, who graduated last year and is now at State University on a scholarship Margaret provided. She cleared her throat and began reading. Dear Mrs. Williams, I know you don't want thanks, but I need to give it. You didn't just pay for my college, you believed in me when nobody else did. You sat through my terrible performance in the school play, cheered at my basketball games, even when we lost, and never made me feel poor or different. You made me feel seen. I'm studying to be a teacher because I want to see kids the way you saw me. Love, Marcus. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Father Michael from Street. Mary stepped forward. Margaret Williams understood something most of us forget, that love multiplies when it's shared, and wealth means nothing if it's hoarded. She turned her money into miracles, her loneliness into service, her heartbreak into healing. He looked around the packed room. Her children may have forgotten her, but we never will. Her legacy isn't in a bank account, it's in every life she touched, every dream she made possible, every heart she healed. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous and sustained. People were crying, hugging, sharing stories of the woman who'd mothered an entire town while her own children forgot to call. Outside in the parking lot, a silver sedan sat with 4 occupants who'd driven from the city, drawn by social media posts about the memorial. David, Jennifer, Mark, and Michael Williams sat in stunned silence, listening to hundreds of people celebrate the mother they'd never really known. They'd thought they were mourning a forgotten woman. Instead, they discovered they were the ones who'd been forgotten. 6 months after the memorial service, Millbrook looked different. The Margaret Williams Community Garden bloomed where an empty lot had been. The playground at the elementary school rang with children's laughter. The senior center bore a plaque that read, in honor of Margaret Williams, who taught us that family is found, not born. But the biggest changes weren't visible on any map. David Williams sat on the porch swing of his mother's house, the house that now belonged to the town, but had been opened to him for the day by a community that understood grief, even when it came late. He'd taken a sabbatical from his high-pressure job, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. His wife Sarah had been surprisingly supportive. You need to figure out who you are without the office, she'd said gently. Your boys need to know their father, not just your bank account. The photo album his mother had mentioned sat open on his lap. David's first steps, first day of school, First Little League home run, first graduation. Page after page of a childhood he'd forgotten he lived, preserved by a woman who'd treasured every moment. His phone buzzed. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. "I'm bringing the kids to visit Mom's garden," she said without preamble. "Want to meet us there?" David closed the album carefully. "I'll be right there." The community garden was bustling with activity. Jennifer knelt beside the rose bushes, explaining to her 8-year-old daughter Emma how Grandma Margaret had loved flowers. Her son Jake, 10, was helping Mrs. Rodriguez plant tomatoes, the same woman who'd taught him math when Jennifer couldn't afford tutoring. "The lady who lived here before was really nice," Emma told her Uncle David seriously. "Mrs. Rodriguez says she used to give the best hugs and always remembered everyone's birthday." David knelt down to his niece's level. "She was your grandma, Emma." "My mom." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Why didn't we ever meet her?" The question hung in the air. Like a challenge, like a promise, like a truth that couldn't be avoided anymore. Mark appeared with a young man David didn't recognize. Marcus Johnson, the scholarship recipient whose letter had been read at the memorial. Marcus was home from college for the summer, working with the Parks Department to maintain Margaret's legacy projects. "Your mother changed my life," Marcus told Mark simply. "I wanted you to know that. She didn't just give me money, she gave me hope." Mark nodded, his throat tight. He'd started a nonprofit in his mother's name, focusing on anonymous giving to children in need. It felt like the only way to honor what she'd really valued. Michael arrived last, carrying a folder thick with papers. He'd been interviewing everyone in town, collecting stories about their mother. The screenplay he was writing wasn't the dramatic tragedy he'd first imagined. It was something more powerful. A story about a woman who loved so fully that her love had outlived her, growing stronger with each person it touched. "I think I finally understand," he told his siblings. As they stood together in the garden their mother had funded. "She didn't take our inheritance away. She showed us what inheritance really means." Jennifer wiped her eyes, watching her children play in the space their grandmother had created. "I keep thinking about all the times I said I was too busy to visit. She was right here, 20 minutes away, and I acted like she lived on Mars." "We all did," David said quietly. "We got so wrapped up in our own lives that we forgot she was living hers." An elderly man approached them hesitantly. George Patterson, whose family had been saved from eviction years earlier. "Excuse me, are you Margaret's children?" They nodded, unsure what to expect. George smiled, his weathered face crinkling with warmth. "She talked about you all the time, showed pictures, bragged about your successes. She was so proud of you. Even when," he paused diplomatically, "even when she missed you." "Why didn't she ever tell us?" Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. "About the money, about helping people, about any of it?" "Because that's not who she was," said Mrs. Chen, joining the conversation. "Margaret didn't do good to be praised. She did good because it was good. She loved you kids with her whole heart, but she loved this community too. When you grew up and away, she poured that love into us." David looked around the garden, finally seeing it clearly. This wasn't revenge against ungrateful children. This was love in action, spreading like seeds in fertile ground, growing into something beautiful and lasting. "She did leave us an inheritance," he said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. "She left us an example. She showed us what it looks like to matter, to be remembered, to leave the world better than you found it." Michael smiled through his tears. "She left us a story worth telling. And a lesson worth learning," Mark added. Jennifer gathered her children close, breathing in the scent of her mother's roses. "She left us time," she whispered. "Time to get it right with the people we love before it's too late." As the sun set over Millbrook, Margaret Williams' children stood together in the garden she'd planted, finally understanding the seeds she'd really been sowing. She'd given her money to strangers, but she'd given her children something far more valuable: the chance to learn from her example before their own story was finished. The plaque on the garden gate said, "It all love multiplies when it's shared." Margaret Williams had found a way to multiply her love across an entire town, and finally, across the distance her children had created. She taught them the most important lesson of all. Family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, caring deeply, and leaving a legacy of love that outlasts your lifetime. Her greatest gift wasn't the money she gave away, it was the example she left behind. In the end, she got exactly what she'd always wanted. Her children finally came home,